Motorola, well, okay, Lenovo, the new owners have launched two new Moto Gs, the Moto G4 and the Moto G4 Plus. And it's clear the company has upped the specs and ambitions dramatically, albeit at the expense of losing the waterproofing from the previous generation, sadly. Oddly, the Plus bit doesn't refer to a size difference, but to a couple of specs, and that the G4 Plus comes with a fingerprint scanner and a better camera. Both have a 5.5-inch 1080p display, an octa-core Snapdragon 617 chipset. Both come in two configurations. I hate it when companies confuse us like this, with 3 gig of RAM and 32 gig of storage, or 2 gig and 16, all plus micro SD, of course. The non-Plus Moto G4 has a 13 megapixel rear camera with an f/2.2 aperture, while the Plus model has a 16 megapixel pure cell sensor and an f/2.0 aperture. Both apparently have phase detection autofocus and laser autofocus. Both phones also have a 3000 mAh battery with quick charging, though it's not apparent yet how compatible this is with existing chargers and solutions. As the first company to really deliver unibody aluminium smartphones to the mainstream, HTC has got some form in this game, of course. All the HTC One devices have been terrifically built, and the 10 here is no exception. The One M7 had the big boom sound stereo speakers and a disappointing 4 megapixel main camera. The One M8 had slightly quieter speakers and a gimmicky depth camera on the back, while the One M9 had even quieter speakers. This trend isn't going well. And a more traditional high megapixel sensor, but each was otherwise a bit meh and expensive. But the HTC 10, though still expensive, has rightly been judged a return to form for the company. True, the boom sound speakers are no more. There's just a decent mono loudspeaker on the bottom, iPhone style, plus some high frequencies piped out through the earpiece. Here's a demo. This is full volume. It's pretty good. It's just a good phone speaker. It's reasonably loud. I miss the stereo though. I miss the stereo and I miss the full fidelity, the bass, the treble, you're hearing every instrument from the M7. Components all round have otherwise seen a very decent upgrade, all adding up to perhaps the best HTC smartphone for a long, long time. My tiny grouch over the missing speakers aside, the HTC 10 is just about perfect. Where other manufacturers, Huawei, play at producing metal smartphones with token frames that crumple under stress, HTC have done the job properly. The 10 is incredibly strong with so much metal it can't be bent, even when sat or run over. It's just so solid. The screen is exposed, of course, and remains the most likely point of damage, but being housed in such a strong chassis, you'd hope that the glass is more protected than on more fragile devices. The 10 is heavier than most at 160 grams, but I'd class it as reassuringly heavy. The straight-edged chamfers in the aluminium are elegant and distinctive, and they help one's fingers fit around the phone comfortably. Even at 5.2-inch display, it's easy to hold and use the phone one-handed. And despite the smoothness of the metal, the HTC isn't too slippery to use without a case, I found. Some of the time at least. Don't hold me responsible if you drop yours. The Gorilla Glass 4 protected screen is crisp and clear. HTC's best display ever, labelled as having Super LCD 5 tech and with great colours and viewing angles. The resolution probably didn't need increasing from 1080p on the previous phones given the RGB pixel layout, but HTC bumped it up anyway. At 1440p IQHD resolution, there's no way to see individual pixels at all, and 4K videos look unbelievable. One aspect which should not be overlooked when comparing the current Android flagships is the impact of positioning of the control button cluster. Samsung and HTC have gone for capacitive controls with the slight downside that you can't configure the controls swapping them around, for example, as on recent LG or Huawei devices. But the upside is huge. Not having these controls taking up valuable screen real estate means that a 5.2-inch screen here is genuinely that large all the time, i.e. there's more room for your apps and content. And given the choice, I'd always go for capacitive controls and more efficient use of frontal real estate. Following the iPhone's placement, HTC has put the obligatory for 2016 fingerprint sensor below the display. It's fast and competent, though the similarity in styling to both Apple's and Samsung's designs leads the mind to think that the sensor can be depressed, when in fact it's just a capacitive control with fingerprint sensor and there's no physical movement at all. The right-hand side control buttons are precision engineered, and I love the grippy texture here on the power button. On each side of the phone are pop-out slots for nano SIM on the right and micro SD here on the left, the latter supplementing the 32 gigabytes of onboard storage, so no capacity worries here for the HTC 10. Although well put together, it's notable that there's no dust or waterproofing here, and no easy way to take the 10 apart to dry it out if it does take a dunking. As someone with first-hand experience of water damage on a flagship in my family this week, and noting that Samsung, Motorola, Apple and others are now making at least casual water protection standard, to have no resistance at all here is disappointing. The cameras are interesting, and for the first time ever on a smartphone, both front and back cameras have OIS, helping avoid camera shake and improving low light shots. The main camera is only 9 megapixel in 16:9 mode, but with 1.5 micron pixels, second generation laser autofocus and an f/1.8 aperture, there's plenty of scope for great photos. Slightly oddly, tapping on a spot in the viewfinder doesn't also auto set exposure as on other devices, though there is a slightly fiddly exposure adjustment slider that allows for some arty experimentation, but it needs work. HTC is too slow to respond and too small a control. Plus, you tap to set a focus point, you reframe slightly for arty effect and find that the autofocus takes over again and you've lost your main subject. Surely all this can be improved in updates, but at the moment it's a frustrating experience. The rest of the time I was impressed by the results from the HTC 10 camera though. It's right up with the Lumia 950, LG G5, Galaxy S7 and so on, i.e. in the top flight but not necessarily better than the rest. It does seem that HTC has finally nailed imaging in its flagship. Phew. Videos captured up to 4K and in stereo too, again right up where HTC needs this device to be. 1080p is still the sweet spot, of course, offering both OIS and digital stabilization for super smooth video recording. The audio side of the HTC 10 is top notch, as we've come to expect from the company. Leaving aside that the speaker is now mono, boo, there are some serious DAC smarts here under the hood with loud and clear headphone output, and that's before you turn on the, and I quote, HTC boom sound with Dolby audio enhancements. These amount to appropriate audio processing, including upsampling to 24-bit resolution and equalizer settings, even tailored to your age and hearing loss, or you can go via individual frequencies, adjusting the volumes for each one. It's all rather sophisticated. But there's so much headroom in the electronics here that at no stage did the extra bass and top end seem forced. Good job, HTC. The quality over headphones is right up there with that from my audio-centric Marshall London. HTC also ships a decent pair of in-ear headphones in the box, and that's not something we've come to expect in 2016, so a nice surprise. Powered with a cutting-edge Snapdragon 820 chipset and 4 gigabytes of RAM, just let that figure sink in for a minute, this is the same as on many laptops. Even today, the HTC 10 absolutely flies with no trace of lag or stuttering, and I'd hope so given those specs, though also helping is that the software layers here are stripped back a bit. In terms of UI, HTC's Sense skin over Android gets lighter with each release. And here is not a million miles from what's found on a Nexus device, which is rather, well, wonderful. And there's very little duplication of applications or functions. You don't even get the traditional HTC gallery. Instead, you get Google Photos. The only confusion was the inclusion of HTC's Mail still, while most users were better off using just Gmail, also supplied. But that aside, the application loadout, well, it's well thought out and streamlined. Additions to the stock Android set includes preloads of Facebook, Facebook Messenger and Instagram, though not Twitter, curiously. There's HTC's familiar flashlight, duplicating the same function on the settings shade, but that's a nitpick from me. Plus Boost Plus, another of these cache and app cleaners that are becoming so popular these days, despite Google proclaiming to the world they're not needed. Boost Plus does also offer a way to restrict named games to 1080p, which makes sense rather than these screen trying to upsample them all to 1440p with no benefit whatsoever. Finally, there's the Zoe video editor. Not quite what you think from the name, it just assembles videos from media you've snapped in a similar manner to Google Photos. I think the Zoe brand is probably on its last legs now. The home screen layout is kept simple, with just a couple of example pages of widgets and icons, and HTC's revamped Blinkfeed system off to the left. This now integrates News Republic stories, Google Plus and Twitter, though not, again, curiously, Facebook. There are a few inconsistencies here. Blinkfeed is still a fun system to browse in a bored moment, though Customizing the News Republic content wasn't trivial. You have to add topics in order to get through to the underlying app in order to remove topics. Go figure. And then there's freestyle layout. Implemented as custom semi-interactive themes. The idea is that you can let your imagination run wild with your apps and widgets placed anywhere you like and with cartoon graphics hyperlinked to applications available to add atmosphere. Scurry down a ladder to get a calculator. Tap on the windmill to go into YouTube. You get the idea. It's a wonderfully bonkers piece of lateral thinking from HTC. It's fun for the first day, and then you think, oh, sod it, I want my old Android home screens back, or maybe that's just me. If there's a small flaw in HTC's Perfect 10 here, it's that battery life isn't necessarily stellar at the moment. That 820 processor, QHD screen, 4GB of RAM are perhaps the culprit, but using it as my main smartphone, i.e. for everything, I was below 10% capacity by bedtime. And this is even with Android 6 on board, with Doze helping out and a 3000 mAh battery inside. Admittedly, I was running the display at maximum auto brightness in order to get the pop that I've been used to with AMOLED screened phones, and I dare say that a more frugal setting, there we go, 50% might help. More experiments needed, I think. Charging is via USB Type-C, in common with many other 2016 competitors, Samsung accepted. Plus there's an implementation of Qualcomm's Quick Charge 3.0. Put the two together and you're looking at getting the HTC 10 app from completely flat to about 80% in under an hour, which means that even 10-minute emergency top-ups will each give another couple of hours of real-world use. At £570, the HTC 10 is relatively expensive, but those pre-ordering with HTC, with the promo code HTC10, do currently get 10% off, and resellers already have it under £500. I'd expect the price to settle in the high £400 in the UK. You know the drill by now. I scream in a review through all the device's highlights, then deliver the killer blow of all the gotchas, the showstoppers. And it's here I run into a problem. The HTC 10 really doesn't have any. You can point to work needed in the camera interface or the lack of waterproofing, but that's having to work quite hard to find issues. The HTC 10, from its super audio to snappy performance to very good camera, is the flagship competitor that the company badly needed to deliver, and it has in spades. It may not necessarily be better than the Galaxy S7 or iPhone 6s or similar, but it's right up there with the best. Well done, HTC. That 10 moniker really is deserved.